Okay, great. So hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you to the Pacific Council members and guests who are joining us today for our panel on video games and global entertainment phenomenon. I'm Sumaya Quillian. I'm a programs associate for the events team at the Pacific Council, and we're so happy to have you joining us. And in this panel, we'll be exploring the relationship between the West Coast in the US and Finland in the context of the multi-billion-dollar video game industry. And I'll admit I'm not a subject expert here, so I'm very excited to hear from our speakers today. We have Zuza James from the Consulate General of Finland in LA, Teemu Hutanen, CEO of Next Games. Apology if I messed up that pronunciation, but I'll let you give the correct one. And we have Andrew Stalbo, CEO and co-founder of Seriously Digital Entertainment, and Peter Levin, Managing Director of Griffin Gaming Partners. So as a note to our audience, you will be muted and your video will not be visible during this event, but we encourage your participation throughout with questions. So if you click on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, you will see an option to type in questions. We'll have about 15 minutes toward the end for Q&A, but you can feel free to submit questions at any point during the discussion, and Zuza will be fielding those toward the end of our discussion once we hear from our panelists. So thank you again to everyone for joining us. Thank you so much to the Consulate General of Finland and LA for partnering with us on this event. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Zuza. Thanks.
Thank you, Sumaya. And yes, I want to thank you again, the Pacific Council on International Policy, for hosting this wonderful event today. I want to welcome everybody again who are watching us today. And yes, we have a very distinguished panel of speakers here with us that I'm very, very excited who are able to join. And I'm very excited to hear their insights on the topic of the day, which is an industry that is boasting record numbers despite this global pandemic that's going on, one which has quietly become a centerpiece of our cultural zeitgeist, with now 2.7 billion players around the world, and that is the games industry. So before we jump into our panel, I actually want to do just a very quick overview of the games industry, because I know that we have some folks probably in our audience today who may not be as familiar with it as others. So I'm going to just share my screen here real quick, and then let me know if you can see it. Hopefully you can. Okay. So yes, so hopefully you can see my screen. If not, somebody let me know right away. but yes, so before we jump in, I just wanted to let's see. Yes, you can see. Okay, wonderful, great. Let me show. We'll continue. I'm gonna go back here, right? Okay. Okay, so yes, so I just wanted to introduce myself again real quick. So as Sumaya said, my name is Julia James. I am the Trade Commissioner for Video Games and Esports with the Consulate General of Finland, and I work with Finnish games and esports companies who are interested in entering the US markets, and also with American stakeholders who are interested in getting to know the Finnish game sector. So I'm not going to go through all this, but just wanted to show you that the games industry is although it's a relatively new industry compared to movies, for example, it still has been around for 6 decades, actually going back to a game called Tennis for Two, which was designed by an American physicist for like an analog computer. So if you compare something like that to a game called Fortnite, which I think every one of you with kids would have heard about or have seen, which is an online multiplayer survival game with 250 million players. And which has attracted nearly 28 million unique users to this in-game concert recently by Travis Scott. You can see just how much this fundamentally tech-driven industry has evolved over the years. But what does this mean in terms of industry, in terms of revenues, and in terms of industry turnover? Well, it's actually nearly double that of movies and music combined, which is with 135 billion global revenues in 2018, projected to grow to 60 billion in 2020, and showing anywhere between 3 to 6% growth across all segments, largely actually driven by emerging markets in the Middle East and Latin America. Now, as far as platform segmentation goes, you can see that while both PC and console games are growing, so there's growth across most segments in games, mobile game revenues account for 48% of global game revenues and in the global game market in 2020, which is with by far the highest year-on-year growth rates compared to the other platforms. So a per region breakdown shows that last year, nearly half of all consumer spending in games came from the US and China, with the US leading the way just by a small margin, which makes it now actually the largest game market in the world. So now let's take a look at some more key figures from the US. With 2,900 active studios, of which actually 850 are in California and 280 are in LA, 57% of the world's game development professionals reside in America. That's generating 36.9 billion revenues in revenues. 65% or 200 million of American adults play video games. Their average age, by the way, is 35. And there are 480 college programs, 72 of which are in California with a game development program. Comparatively, Finland has a population of only 5.5 million people, where 220 active studios with altogether more or less 3,200 people or so people built an over $2 billion industry, which comes to, we did the math on this, this is fantastic, nearly $700,000 of value generated per employee. So in addition to the public funding system that's to date invested over $100 million in taxpayers' money into the games industry, Finland also has attracted over $11 billion of outside investment. These investments into Finland include strategic acquisitions, publisher deals, subsidiaries being set up, venture capital funding invested into talented development studios, while Finnish companies are drawn to the US to tap into this huge, the world's largest games market. And then in this environment is where we enter COVID, where COVID enters the space in 2020, upending all of our lives and really creating a new world as we speak, one in which we're stuck at home with little less to do than apparently, eating the essentials, eating, cleaning, and as it turns out, playing. So this recent McKinsey survey shows that despite consumers expecting to cut spending across most categories, home entertainment is actually soaring. The games industry is adapting fast, and for now it seems to be weathering the storm relatively well. But there is also plenty of challenges. For example, how will international cooperation look like going forward? And this, amongst many other subjects, is what I will want to talk with our wonderful guests today. So I will want to dive into that right away. So I would like to bring our panelists back now, where they can turn their cameras back on and their sounds. And I'm going to turn the slide off, stop sharing my screen, so we can do a quick round of introductions. And so while I do that, so in a few words, could you please tell us who you are and your backgrounds in the industry? All right, welcome everybody. So yeah, we could maybe start with Andrew. You're in my top left corner, so let's go with you.
Hey there, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Thanks for having me.
Yes, I can hear you. Hopefully everyone else.
Perfect. So I'm a Brit living in Los Angeles. I came over here in 2008. I was working for 20th Century Fox and helped build up their mobile business, taking their TV and film properties to mobile devices, doing deals in games and video distribution. And we built up built up the business there just as the iPhone was taking off, and built quite a sizable business for them. Along the way, I was lucky enough to meet the team at Rovio, who were bubbling up with Angry Birds, and we put together a deal with a Fox IP, a new movie called Rio that was about birds, and mashed it together with Angry Birds to create a new game and a new revenue stream and a marketing platform for Fox's new movie. I had a really good experience working with the team in Finland on that. Rovio was based in Helsinki, and I just thought what was so interesting about Rovio was this was a team of 10, 20 people working in a very small office in downtown Helsinki. And here they had a property in Angry Birds that looked, for all intents and purposes, like it could have been a major studio IP. And they had no issues distributing it all around the world. They were treating their content like a service, constantly updating it. They were on the devices that consumers were kind of starting to engage with in a big way. It seemed very contrarian to what the big Hollywood studios like Fox were doing, that had the great properties like The Simpsons or Avatar, but didn't have the direct to consumer distribution and the ability to kind of innovate or treat their content like a service. So I joined Rovio for a couple of years, had a good experience there working with Timu, where I focused on a few different business development deals, including one with Lucasfilm where we made Angry Birds Star Wars, and then left and decided to partner up with a guy who ran Rovio's game team, a guy called Petri Arvoletto, who became my partner. And we started a company called Seriously, and built a title called Best Fiends, as in Fiendish. That's a mobile game that also introduces you to a world and characters and story, and is a super fun, engaging puzzle game. And we've been building it up over the last 6 or 7 years, and now have built a reasonable business. But as you said, it's a great opportunity for creators to be able to create something that consumers can enjoy, and right at the intersection of creativity and data, and really enjoyed building up our own business over the last few years. We're about 120 people at Seriously, split between Los Angeles, where we do some of our animation creation and some of our brand work and a lot of our marketing, and Helsinki, where we have about 110 people focused on also brand development and game development over there too, where we have 2 titles that we run, one called Best Fiends and a follow-up sequel called Best Fiends Stars.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew. All right, let's move over to Peter.
Hey there, thanks for having me. Peter Levin, I am a managing director of Griffin Gaming Partners. We're an investment vehicle singularly focused on investing across the entire video game landscape. I've been investing in the video game space for going on 3 decades now. So first investment I ever made was GameSpy Industries back in '98, which we sold to IGN. And then News Corp, and my most recent exit was I was a seed investor in Hypixel, which we sold to Riot just a few weeks ago. Prior to standing up Griffin with my 2 partners, Phil Sanderson, who's kind of a storied track record as an investor in the game space. First money into Discord, first money into Funzio, first money into Phoenix Labs, which sold to Garena just a few weeks ago as well. He also runs multiple 100-mile races every year, so there's that. Our other partners are Nick Tuasto and Lion Tree. Nick was the architect of the sale of Supercell to Tencent. He was on the Tencent side of that transaction. Just sold Fox Next to Scopely. Was in the middle of the King Activision transaction, sold Command's assets to Netmarble. So that's the partnership. Just prior to standing up Griffin with Nick and Phil and Lion Tree, I stood up Lionsgate's games business for them. So everything from introducing commercially John Wick into Fortnite, to putting out a John Wick PC console game, to a Power Rangers mobile game, and a couple of dozen other titles along the way. And prior to that, I was a co-founder CEO of Nerdist Industries, which sold to Legendary in 2012. And relative to this panel, I've been super active in the Nordics for a really long time. So I've known Teemu for longer than both of us care to admit. I was a board member at Sulake, or Habbo Hotel, for about 5 years. So I've been to Finland 50 plus times. Very active and invested in the market for a long while. Very early with the Rovio, years before it made its way onto the Fox lot. So helped them put their global licensing and merchandise program together with and for them, and got bought out early by XL and Atomico. So very fun ride there. But I consider it my second home. So whenever I'm asked by Finns to do anything, I do my best to show up and represent. You know, it's a very unique market that punches well above its weight, just in terms of scale, of the population, and kind of it's a longer conversation we could have around, you know, why we think it is, has established the prowess that it has, but it has. So glad to be here.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. And yes, we'll definitely touch on that. So save those good points for that. All right. So Teemu.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for having me, and greetings from Helsinki. It's something like 38 Fahrenheit here, so pretty much like still winter, not summer. So yeah, I'm Teemu Huhtanen, CEO of Next Games, and Next Games is a Finnish mobile game developer and publisher. We were founded back in 2013, and we are actually the first games company that went public in Finland, and that happened in 2017. Then about Next Games briefly, our mission is really to redefine how the big franchise entertainment, like all the big Hollywood IPs, would transform into mobile games. And we've already launched 2 Walking Dead games, and those games are based on the hit AMC television show. And then really excited about working with Netflix. So later this year, we're launching a game based on the Stranger Things. That's a massive TV show as well. And then we have a game based on the Blade Runner IP also in the works. And about myself, I've been in games business for well over 20 years. So I started my first gaming company back in '99. And back then, obviously, mobile games were played, you know, with text messages, and there were no graphics and so forth. So I've seen the huge development to the current phones, iPhones, and so forth. So like Andrew mentioned, I was with Andrew at Rovio for a while. Before that, used to work for Sulake, and Peter was on the board at Sulake. And back then I lived actually in LA for 5 years, and now with Next Games since 2013.
Awesome, wonderful. Yes, so I love that there's just so much history, kind of like going back and forth from knowing each other from US and Finland. So there's a lot of great experiences here to share. So let's actually jump right in. I wanted to start with, to be honest, I wanted to address this first to Peter and Andrew, but Teemu, you've lived in LA as well, so it's actually open to everyone. Since the topic of today, I really wanted to kind of like look at international collaboration through the lens of US and Finland, and how that works. One of the aspects that I want to know about is what actually makes these places so special. Why is it that that the West Coast in particular has been such an incredible place and such a special place for game development throughout history, where some of the most iconic companies have grown out from. So this is to all of you, but of course, Peter and Andrew, you're based in LA. You've been in the industry here for a long time. I would love to get your take on it. That what makes the West Coast such a special place for game development?
I mean, I'd say it's one of several hotbeds of iconic games businesses, and I think so much of it stems from the fact that it is truly a melding of technology and creativity. Mm-hmm. So when you have Silicon Valley and all that represents, just in terms of scale and network, and it's a very Darwinian environment up there, right? If you don't vibrate at a certain level, you're out. You're just not going to make it. So it's just generated some incredible technological talent. And at the same time, it's also generated, some of the core DNA of the games industry. So when you look at things like Atari and you look at things like Electronic Arts in those very, very early days, and on down, so much of that DNA came out of that marketplace, and even some of the early venture backers of the games industry, that's where that emanated. And then the proximity to a market like Los Angeles, where, it is the intellectual property hub of the world. And so with those worlds kind of rapidly colliding, which COVID-19 has accelerated, truncated that window significantly, and the value of intellectual property and the role that that plays. And then you kind of look at a global matrix of, well, where are the power players in 5G and cloud gaming, the new portfolio players in distribution, the value of intellectual property and competitive gaming. You've got Riot and Activision here in Los Angeles, which are the two market leaders with respect to competitive gaming. The distribution players, if you look at, that ecosystem, it's Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Seattle for the most part, other than, the major Asian players, which in some instances dwarf what we're doing here. But just in terms of that ecosystem, Los Angeles and San Francisco have really become these massive power hubs that they were not necessarily before.
Yeah.
And I'll add to that as well. I think, if there are 4 things that I think are interesting about the US for, and LA and the West Coast for any game company, any mobile game company, any game company, obviously Los Angeles does attract a lot of creators. You get people that want to start and create something from nothing, amazing creative talent that have either worked on games or TV shows or films and or stories. It's the world's epicenter for creativity, and I think and certainly the home of it in the US. So that's obviously a really important piece. As Peter said, I think technically it's a highly technical market. You're also seeing in LA an amazing amount of engineers come into the city. You're seeing obviously West Coast is the technological hub of the US as well. So it's a great mix between creativity and technology. I think the other thing is, per what Peter does, there's an incredible amount of capital here. It's not cheap to set up a new business, to get it going, to fund it, to build, to compete with the incumbents, and the capital's important. And then lastly, this is the #1 market for, in the West, certainly. And it's just really, really important to understand this market if you're going to kind of launch over here. One wise person once said to me, when you're starting a game company, you've got limited amounts of capital, a very small team. If there's one market you want to cut through on, it's the US, and you really need to kind of focus on that. And here's a great place to be able to kind of figure out your entry points into the market.
Wonderful. Yeah. Tamo, did you want to add anything to that from the West Coast side? Because actually, I have a question for you. The same thing regarding Finland, but again, since you did live in LA, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Not really. I think both Peter and Andrew gave perfect answers, but maybe one thing that since in Finland Finland is definitely one of the hotbeds for mobile game development, if not the one, the hottest place. I think that's the same for creating content and IPs for Los Angeles. So it's basically like if you can make it in Helsinki, you're competing with the best players like Supercell, Rovi, and so forth. You definitely can make it globally, and I think same goes for LA. Like if you can make something that matters over there, then it's kind of a not automatic global hit, but definitely has a good chance for that.
Great, yeah. So then to you actually. So you talked about how you have a long history with seeing the game development from the early mobile phones, going to where it is now. Can you actually walk us through the rise of the Finnish games industry, and obviously in Cliff Notes there's a long and very interesting history there as well with some the market forces and how technology changes have affected the industry, but kind of like briefly, what in your opinion were some of the main drivers behind the industry's success and its continued success, and what makes it unique?
Yeah, sure. So gaming started later than it started as a business, for example, in the US. So I actually remember started playing the first games with Commodore 64 somewhere in the mid 80s. And that's when, the first, Finnish individuals, not really companies, but individuals made their first games. And that was kind of the first phase, the introduction to games for all of us here, at least my age. And then the next phase was the kind of the gatherings of all these individual developers, or a lot of people call it demo scene, where people came and showed off like what they've done with the different platforms. And then these smaller companies started to form, and for really like 10 years nothing major happened, but in the late 90s and maybe like early 2000, a couple of things really started to happen. On the other hand, you had PC and console developers like Remedy and Housemarque that made really big games, like Max Payne was a global hit. But at the same time, we were fortunate enough to have Nokia here headquartered in Helsinki. And I have to say that Nokia kind of self-funded the Finnish game developers for quite a few years when they tried to find a way to get into games business. Obviously they never succeeded, but they get a lot of companies like my company alive for many years because they kept, ordering different games and showcases for their devices. And eventually, like, when iPhone then came in, was it 2006 or 7, that's the next break for Finnish companies, when you had the direct distribution of your own games. And obviously Rovio was a huge success back then with Angry Birds. And then a couple of years after that, another kind of a swift was the change to free-to-play business model, especially on mobile devices. And I think Supercell represents that success the best. And during all those years, like I think Finland had something that many other countries don't have, which is the support from the government. So if you start
Sorry, but just very quickly, for those who are watching and who may not be familiar with the industry, would you just in one sentence define what free to play is?
Yeah, free to play is games that you can download and install on your phone, for example, for free. And then if you decide that you like the game and you like to make purchases in the game, you can do so. But basically it's free for any consumer to download the game.
Thank you. Yeah,
sure.
Sorry, and you were talking about the public.
Yeah, and then the government grants, which to my knowledge really doesn't happen in the US at least, is where if you raise, let's say, 200,000 for your early startup, the government will most likely match that investment for you to have a better chance to succeed with your company. So hats off for the Finnish government in many ways for the success of many of these companies, even Supercell and definitely Next Games as well. But all in all, the biggest thing I think is the strong feeling of one community here in Helsinki. So every game company, it doesn't matter if you work for another company, you always try to help them or the company or the individual to succeed, whether they need help in getting in touch with somebody in LA or whatever it is. I think it's very unique how the gaming community takes care of each other. And never forget the importance of the long winter. It's still winter here.
Yes.
So we have nothing else to do.
Nothing else to do than code games. It's perfect. Yes, absolutely. And thank you, Teemu. And yes, it's that sort of culture, culture of collaboration that is that it's also shows. I think that IGDA's the International Game Developers Association has one of its most active chapters in Finland, for example. It's also a great community for game developers to network with each other. So all of you have worked with each other, over the years in different capacities, and some of you are working together now and have decided at some point in time to want to work with somebody from Finland or with the company, or want to come to the US for one reason or another. Could you talk us through a little bit about that? How did you first get involved for Peter and Andrew with Finland, Why did you decide that you wanted to, either to work there or to invest there? And conversely, Teemu, why the decision to look to the US to work with IPs and otherwise here?
I mean, for me, I at the time I was, it's a long time ago, 15, 17 years ago, I was serving on multiple boards for Benchmark Capital Europe and Israel at the time, their games company sports, as the independent board member. And one of the board members knew I had a personal proclivity for Habbo Hotel, Sulake. I had very strong opinions about it as a product. And so he invited me to join that board. And very quickly, I found, unlike some of the other smaller markets that I had dealt with over the years, that working with folks like Teemu and Timo at Sulake, we were able to get things done very quickly. So two of the first IPs, Teemu, I think we pursued were Twilight and American Idol, which at the time were probably the two biggest intellectual properties in the business. One from a publishing and a theatrical standpoint, Twilight and American Idol at that point in time. We have funny stories about them and ski trips, but that's for another time. But we were able to put those deals together and relationships together very quickly, which for me was a fascinating alternative universe to what a lot of smaller markets end up tripping over themselves on, which is not being able to get across the goal line and putting those types of relationships in place. So I think myself standing at the center of what was happening in Finland and what was happening in the States, I was able to interpret and help get the relationships in place. But I give much more credit to the Finns who, this is somewhat of a foreign exercise and kind of putting their trust in somebody in between the dialogue and letting the process play out in such a manner that they were able to, as a small company at the time with Habbo out of a market like Helsinki, which was lesser known at the time as a games powerhouse, they were able to attract two of the biggest IPs in the world. And so I do think that coupled to the over-indexing innovation in the market, you also have an openness and an appetite to put these relationships in place and put them in place efficiently. Because there is a cynicism, I think, and a skepticism, in the entertainment industry around what's happening in some of these smaller markets and how do you actually put these relationships in place and is the brain damage worth it? And oftentimes the answer is no, it's just simply not. And so I give them credit for kind of being first through the wall there and being aggressive and making these partnerships truly feel like partnerships. And then the flip side of it is to the point that Teemu brought up at the top of the call, which is something we talk about a lot, which is this kind of perfect storm of Nokia being, the first kind of handset manufacturer to look at the phone as something more than just telephony, but actually, delivering. I remember Snake, right? Snake on the Series 40 and Series 60, that was the first game of its kind, but the fact that that was contemplated so early on. So you had that DNA mixing with the DNA coming out of the Remedies and the Sulakes. So all of a sudden you had this, this confluence of talent. They were kind of populating startups, teaching at university, once they left these big platforms like Nokia. So all of a sudden it became, this hotbed for that type of activity.
For me, I obviously knew I knew some of the people at Nokia, but when Angry Birds bubbled up, there was something about that game that I just thought was amazing. And when I always remember we had this idea for this partnership between the Fox movie and the Angry Birds game. And I remember telling my then boss, I said, the thing, he was asking me constantly, how's the deal going? Are you going to be able to get it done? And I said, look, they actually won't respond to my emails. They were so kind of, everybody in Hollywood was trying to approach them and work with them. And I remember saying to my then boss, I think I just got to fly to Helsinki and I'm here in LA, 12, 14 hours away. And he was like, Helsinki? Oh my God, like it's like so far away for anybody in LA, and isn't it really cold? And you're willing to go to the other side of the world. And I remember, once I finally got in touch, what I found there was, in Helsinki was pretty amazing. I remember the guy who was CEO and founded Rovio at the time, a guy called Mikkel Head, who was a super creative guy that came out of comic books and had a certain touch and flair on the creative side, and that's representative across a lot of talent in Helsinki. The quality of the work that comes out of Helsinki, I mean, they're amazing engineers, always very consistent, very straightforward, deliver on time. It's very, very impressive working with engineering and product development teams in Helsinki, in my experience, both working with Rovio and at Seriously. And then you have a very kind of straightforward communication manner in Finland that really allows you to be able to work across there's a lot of trust formed. People in Finland are very kind of say what they think, very straightforward about it. And it does allow you to kind of build partnerships in a very kind of trustworthy way very quickly. So it's a great place to kind of be able to work, be able to kind of find good partners, and I think build businesses together. And I've been, like Peter, I've probably been to Helsinki, 50 times plus as well. And I think per Timo's point about the market kind of working well together and the community of game developers all working well together, it's amazing the welcome you get for kind of going over there, spending the time. And you feel that across the community. It's a very, very strong community, and always at the forefront of kind of mobile game technology features, ideas. So good, brilliant market to work with if you get the chance.
So lovely to hear. It's cold weather, but we are warm on the inside. So very nice. So Teemu, what is your? Peter doesn't agree. Not always.
Just to have vodka.
Yeah. So Teemu, what about you? How's your experience been working with the US?
Well, I have to say that I do agree what both Andrew and Peter said, but maybe like from my personal perspective, even in early 2000, when I had my own company, and back then I was reaching out to Comedy Central and many other big companies back then, like they had South Park and so forth. I kind of believe that Americans can create great stories and IPs, and they know how to promote that. But we Finns have the technology to bring it to a new platform like mobile. And I really believed strongly in that, and I think that was kind of the recipe of getting these negotiations ongoing, and soon many of these partnerships that Peter mentioned. And I do believe, like in early 2000, 2003 and 4, when I was in LA and talking to Disney and everyone else and trying to explain that we would like to make games based on the free-to-play business model, where we give out the game for free and then people will eventually start paying for it. And everyone thought that I'm absolutely crazy, I'm stupid, I have no idea what I'm talking about. But Sulake, the company hotel that I worked for back then, and Peter served on the board, it is the first company, together with Nexon, the South Korean huge gaming company, that started the free-to-play phenomenon. Obviously those games were on the web, not on the phone back then, but Disney eventually started working with us back in 2005, and we created the virtual Magic Kingdom for them. So it took a couple of years to convince them and others, but here we are. So I think both countries kind of understand their roles and responsibilities in creating great partnerships.
And their strengths as well. I think you touched on something very interesting, that there seems to be a sort of, that's a thesis that I think a lot of us have, is that there's a lot of great game development talent in Finland, and that's coupled with the fantastic storytellers, and that's really what it is. People, marketers and creatives in LA and in the West Coast in general creates this really, really powerful combination. And so here we are now. A few months into this year, and then of course the world has changed quite a bit for a lot of the world. But it seems like that the games industry is really like weathering this, as I said, like weathering this storm pretty well. And it's not only is it seems to be shielded from the effects of it, but it's actually boosting pretty good numbers when it comes to downloads and when it comes to usage. So why do you guys think that is? What is sort of can you talk to us about the effect of the pandemic on the industry, both from sort of like the player perspective, obviously, but also from the business and specifically from the international corporation perspective? Obviously, the industry is very digital, so we are all very distributed. We are kind of like used to this type of working, but still there's some old conventions around studios being in one place, business development being done face to face. How is that changing, and how will that change in the next year or two? What do you think? How do you see it evolving?
I mean, I think that you asked a couple of questions there. So
yes,
demonstrating my master's degree in the obvious, people are at home a lot more than they were before. So that the engagement metrics are nothing short of astronomical, and there's very real binary data there, and you see it with the numbers coming out of Activision with Call of Duty Warzone, and you see it with the high capacity networks of AT&T and Verizon being stressed, and you saw it in Italy when they were asking kids to stop playing Fortnite in the afternoons when they were at their apex of the virus and they needed to transport data-rich medical files over the high-capacity networks. You saw it with Discord being stressed for its first time ever, and week after week, Steam was breaking its sales records. So the data is very much there. I think psychologically, though, you had for the last couple to 3 years, in particular on the business side, if you read the analyst reports, they would throw these very antiseptic numbers at you. Oh, gaming is 3 times larger than film and 5 times larger than television and larger than film, television, music, and publishing combined. And these were all, arm's length statistics that felt like they were years off. I think it's been laid bare now for everyone that if you're sheltering at home and you're with an of-age person, they're either playing games or watching other people play games. They're not watching appointment television. They'll never see a cable bill or a satellite bill. And so I think psychologically, there's also been this aha moment that wasn't necessarily contradicting the data, but the data just felt like it was happening to other people. People that were working 9 to 5 or, hours beyond that weren't necessarily exposed to what, their kids were doing day in and day out with that free time. Now that's just been, again, incredibly laid bare. And so I think the practical application of what's happening, coupled to the psychological aha moment, has led to so much being written about it and talked about it. And there's not a person anecdotally that you'll bump into, that won't ask the question of, what game should Sally or Johnny be playing? And what, if I'm to buy a console, which one should I? Because people are dealing with very real world issues right now.
Yeah.
I'll add to that as well. I think what's amazing about being in the games business right now is we can all work from home, distributed. I think everyone's making it work, and we're getting updates out, we're creating new content, we're being innovative, we're engaging with our audience. Our audience is looking for something to distract them from, from the pandemic, and we can all kind of have a little impact to make their lives a little bit more fun and better. And it's so, we're super lucky to be in this space at this time. I think, as Peter said, what we're really seeing with the pandemic is, there were structural shifts that were happening. For some of us in the industry, we could see it very clearly. For some of those outside the industry, maybe it was harder to tell. But this has really speeded up those structural shifts, not just in games, also in streaming video, also in online groceries, in all the SaaS and work tools that we use to kind of work from home as effectively as we can. So we're lucky to be in a place where we can still deliver great experiences for our audience. And then, you know, as Peter said, I think it's going to be a really big opportunity for all of us. I mean, look, the other interesting thing that I think it's one of these other things that's also in plain sight. I remember talking to one investor at one point, a major European investor there was kind of Series A, Series B, made those kinds of investments across a range of different verticals. And they were saying to me that actually, if you look at European VC returns over the last 10 years, 20 to 25% of those returns have come from the games industry. So it's not like, you know, it's suddenly a surprise that games companies that are living at the intersection of kind of data and creativity and kind of entrepreneurial growth, it's not really a surprise that at this stage, you know, when people have a little bit more time on their hands, that this industry can't thrive.
All right, Teemu, did you want to add anything to it?
No, those were great answers. Good with those.
Okay, sorry about that. That's my dog in the background. Okay, we just decided to bark. Okay, so I think that we are now getting close to the end. So I'm going to we can move on to the Q&A. So I'm going to take a look at what questions do we have here. Okay, so Scott Olivet, I hope I'm saying the last name right, is asking a couple of questions here. So one of the questions, it appears that most mobile gaming companies have had a hard time following up a big hit with a second big title. Is this true? If so, what is the cause, and are there success stories that provide insight for others? I mean, I think there are examples to the opposite, but do any of you take that?
Okay, Andrew, you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. I'll go first. I think that generally speaking, any company that figures out a way to get a hit and builds a product that has great KPIs, great engagement, starts to build up a bit of a brand. Actually, what you find is, because you're also building out the team at the same time and you're really kind of trying to grow that business, what most games companies tend to find is anything else they're doing tends to be a little bit of a distraction compared to the massive opportunity they have in front of them, just scaling up the product that has found product market fit. And I'd say the biggest challenge that the Teemus and the Me's and other people that are running a games business have is, once you can find product market fit, then really you really are focused on scaling up. So it does make, you know, there's no doubt about it, it is hard to come out with a second title and then really grow it. But there are obviously a few examples of companies that just have such a strong and amazing DNA that they're able to do it. But there's no doubt. Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it's hard. It's understandable, and then the utterly brilliant companies are able to do it.
Yeah, I think it was a great answer. You stole my answer basically. So I fully agree with.
So you should go first next time, Teemu.
I'm gonna go first. Yeah.
That's the moral of the story. Okay, so then there was a question from Claudia. That's actually to me, but I think the others have seen some of these numbers as well, so they can jump in. So there was a question that I opened the call with the industry and mentioned the growth of the gaming industry during COVID. What specifically are you measuring? Is it just about the revenue, or the development or projection of growth in the future reflected in stock prices? There's been different numbers. I think the ones that I was looking at was on the McKinsey one in particular was talking about intent on like purchasing, basically, like, so the intent of customers to purchase or spend, intent on spend. I have also seen numbers of downloads being up by 70%, like just downloads of games. So that has nothing to do with like the pay on it, but just downloading. And I've also seen revenues being up by X, so I think it was like 20 or 30%. So it depends on what you look at. What that particular slide was about, customer intent on purchasing. But I'm curious, like, if the others have seen something, if the panelists have seen, like, how much, or if Claudia, if you're interested in a particular number, but it's all across the board. It's looking good for the industry right now. I've also seen the basically games industry ETFs being positive and have grown quite a lot lately. Okay, one more question regarding, let's see. Ooh, that's a really long question. It's going to take me super long just to read it. Okay, there is somebody asking with a small investor in mind, what publicly traded innovative companies would you suggest looking at in both game creation and gaming sports? Or I'm assuming you mean esports. Do you mean to invest in? Well, actually, okay, we can take that. But there was actually a question that I was going to ask from you guys that's kind of like is related to this, which is around like what industry trends you think are super interesting right now. What are you excited about? What do you think is going to be the next big thing? What would be good things to look at for, well, small investors, but anyone who is interested in the games industry right now, looking to invest, for example.
So I think, look, you brought up at the top of the call that, or I think Andrew mentioned it. There's a lot of capital now in gaming, right? I call it, there's a lot of tourist capital, right? So, folks that were blockchain funds 5 minutes ago are now all of a sudden games funds, and you're going to see more and more of that, which, I think there's some upside and there's some downside to it. I think some of the investment that went into competitive gaming or esports, for example, I think some of those folks are going to have a very bumpy ride. To just invest in a sector of the industry because it's the shiny toy. VR, for example, kind of 2-3 years ago, VR was the shiny toy, and almost everyone who touched it got burned, right? And so I think some of the highlights, some of the dynamic areas that we're looking at that we're excited about are, truly cross-platform opportunities, native cross-platform opportunities. And you're seeing more and more of them pop up. I think Phoenix Labs, again, was a good example of it, which Karina gobbled up, and Epic has done an unbelievable job cross-platforming with their titles. Even Activision with Call of Duty has done a great job with cross-platforming. But you're seeing now more and more native cross-platform businesses emerge. And that's super exciting. I think, and I'm not just saying this because it's the right thing to say or do, but addressing the female cohort is something that, even though the numbers are 10 years ago, it was 90% male, 10% female. Today it's 55, 45, depending on who you talk to. That's still a big delta. And the women spend more on mobile games than men do. And so the offerings to females have been very, I'd say, pedestrian thus far. But you're seeing some really interesting business models emerge with companies, like what Playrix has been able to do, like what Tactile's been able to do, and some others where there's a mashing up of genres and the applications of those genres. So whether it's a strong narrative coupled to, puzzle design, even Small Giant was a great example of a mashup of genres. So this genre mashup that we're seeing, we're excited about it. And then addressing both geographies and demographics that are underserved. And again, not just because it's the right thing to do, but, we're not a communist fund. So, we're here to make money. So there's also, I think, real opportunity to bring better experiences to these demographics, which is great for the industry.
Yeah.
I'll add to that. If I was making any recommendations around kind of, games companies to look at, I think these are the quality. There are probably two qualities that I think are really important. Obviously, one is like strong leadership, great culture, great focus. It's really hard to do this and to cut through and to build something out. And I think having worked in the space a long time, the companies that are successful have just clarity of their focus and stay true and consistent to that. And then the second piece is, look at Peter's background, right? It's It's the brands. And in a world of all these unlimited content choices, it's the brands that cut through. Obviously, that's been something that's helped define Temu's strategy, helped define our strategy a little bit. Brands can build longevity. They build long relationships with the audience. We're in a unique time when, Fortnite's connected to so many different players. All of our brands are. And so I think that's a really important element to look at if you're considering, for the person who asked the question about investment.
Yeah, very good points. And I would like to add one thing. I think that we're gonna, hit like a huge recession pretty soon, and there are gonna be tens of millions of people that don't have the same amount of money to spend on games that they did before. So the shift to free-to-play games that people are going to be able to download for free, I think it's going to be quite visible. And then if you're investing in companies that don't have that business model as one of their business models, I think I would be careful then. But that's my personal opinion.
I would also say the flip side of that is, if you're a company in gaming looking to raise capital, and this is very self-serving, but it's true because I've been on both sides of this conversation, and I've been on multiple boards with Temu where we had to gauge this. You're going to want smart capital because we are going into some rough waters, and you're going to want capital on your balance sheet that's going to help you weather the storm, not just dumb money. And I think focusing too much on valuation right now versus, being able to withstand what the next 18 to 24 months are going to be, much more important. And you see the smarter entrepreneurs get that versus I think some of the others that are just gravitating towards, I want to get as much as I can, levering off of the hype of what's happening because of COVID's impact on this industry. And that, I think, is a very short-sighted way to look at it.
Yeah. Both investor and investee has to be is ideally knowledgeable about the market. And so, okay, I want to close out on one last question, which I think is a really good one for a takeaway, and that would be, what lessons can other countries and companies take from the relationship between California and Finland when looking to grow their own indigenous industries,
I think you're certainly, for the gaming space, you're marrying the entertainment capital of the world with, as Timo said, the mobile game capital of the world. So if you're thinking about it from a gaming standpoint, I think there's magic at the intersection of those two things.
I would add, I think there's some great examples of small markets like, again, Finland, New Zealand, Israel, where they, by pure necessity, when they're building their products, they have to build from go with a global orientation because their backyard isn't big enough to sustain, right? So, so I think for smaller markets, I think one of the fundamental differences with Finland is they don't just play well with the US, they play well globally and internationally, right? They're able to partner with some of the biggest players on the distribution side, on the finance side. So I think it's, kind of being self-aware enough about, your market and the particular dynamics. And then, as I said earlier, just being, not digging in on templates or constructs of a relationship without fully understanding the pain points on the other side. I think the Finns have done a great job of playing really, really well with others.
Thank you. Teemu, any last thoughts? What takeaways?
Well, takeaways, like I would recommend being honest. Like I think it was already mentioned, like a lot of people obviously want to go to Hollywood just because it's Hollywood, but you have to be very specific on why you go in there and how you're going to make that partnership a success for that company in California as well. So I think that's something that, like it was mentioned already, but Finnish companies are pretty straightforward, and we typically try to communicate what do we want out of the deal, and then it's much easier to get the deals done and the partnership going. So whether it's true or not, but I think that's recommended.
It's always a good one. That's a good one to end on, I think. So Thank you so much, all of you, Andrew, Peter, Teemu, for taking part and for taking time out of your day. And all right, and I think we're going to have Sumaya pop back for some closing words.
Hello again. Thank you so much, Andrew, Peter, and Teemu for joining us today. And again, a special thank you to Suzette, the Consulate General of Finland in LA, for partnering with us on this event and planning this with us. And thank you to our members and all the guests who joined and spent this hour with us. We really appreciate your support during this time. And we will continue to produce even more virtual programming over the coming weeks. So I encourage you to go to our website, pacificcouncil.org, to see all of our upcoming events. And if you're able to give any additional support during this time, you can donate to the Pacific Council at pacificcouncil.org/donate. So I hope you all stay safe and healthy out there, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.